Imagine waking up every day not knowing if you'll live to see the sunset. The man who was supposed to protect the empire, bring peace and justice, was the same man who, with a snap of his fingers, could decree your death on a whim. That man was Caligula, the emperor who ruled Rome with a mix of madness, cruelty, and unpredictability. Think about it. How would it feel to live with your heart racing all the time, unable to trust anyone? One day, he ordered grand feasts. The next, he executed his most loyal allies. Caligula was an emperor who terrified even the bravest soldiers, a leader who turned Rome into a place where no one was safe. Not senators, not generals, not the common people. But do you know what's even more terrifying? Caligula's absolute power had no limits. He saw himself as a god and demanded worship as if he were divine. Even his horse seemed safer than any human being. Imagine living under such weight, always fearing you might be the next target of his wrath. In this video, I'll show you how Rome descended into chaos under his reign, how Caligula's madness destroyed families, friendships, and even trust in the empire's power. And most importantly, I'll reveal how it all ended, how the emperor's very madness led to his final destiny. If you think you've heard frightening stories before, wait until you hear Caligula's. Stay with me and uncover how Rome faced its worst nightmare. Hey, are you enjoying this story full of twists and mysteries? Then take a moment to subscribe to the channel and leave a like. That way you won't miss any videos like this, and you'll help us keep bringing you amazing content. Go ahead, click the button. It's quick. Now let's dive back into the chaos of Caligula's reign. It all began when Caligula was just a little boy. Picture a 2- or 3-year-old child walking with his father, Germanicus, a great Roman general, during military campaigns. He was so adorable that the soldiers dressed him in a miniature soldier's outfit, complete with tiny boots. They loved him so much they gave him the nickname Caligula, meaning little boots. Little did they know that this charming child would become one of the most feared and mad emperors in history. Caligula's childhood was far from easy. He grew up witnessing his family being torn apart by power struggles. His father died under mysterious circumstances, his mother, Agrippina, lived in despair, and many of his siblings were taken from his life. Imagine how frightening it must have been for a child to live in a place where everyone seemed to conspire against each other. It was in this dark and distrustful environment that Caligula grew up, learning early on that power could be cruel. Caligula's father, Germanicus, was a hero to the Roman people, a general admired for his bravery. But during a trip to Egypt, he mysteriously fell ill and died. The story was shrouded in rumors. Some said he was poisoned by the province's governor, while others believed it was the work of Emperor Tiberius himself. Imagine losing someone so dear and hearing whispers that it might have been planned. Caligula was just a child when this happened, and the tragedy left deep scars on his life. After Germanicus's death, Caligula's mother, Agrippina, did something profoundly moving. She decided to personally take her husband's ashes back to Rome. Picture a woman alone with her young children, crossing lands and seas. Cities wept and paid homage as she passed through, as if the entire empire was in mourning. When she finally arrived in Rome, Germanicus's ashes were placed in the mausoleum of Augustus, a site reserved for Rome's greatest leaders. Yet throughout all of this, Emperor Tiberius was notably absent, deepening Agrippina's suspicions that he had orchestrated her husband's death. The relationship between Agrippina and Tiberius deteriorated rapidly. She was convinced that he had conspired against Germanicus, creating a tense atmosphere in Rome. Tiberius, in turn, resented Agrippina's unwavering determination and began to see her as a threat. Meanwhile, Agrippina's children, including Caligula, were closely monitored. Agrippina did everything she could to protect her family, but Tiberius's court was rife with intrigue. Sejanus, the emperor's most influential advisor, began spreading lies about her and her children, working to eliminate any chance they might have of inheriting the throne. Imagine growing up in such an environment, surrounded by distrust, where even smiles could mask hidden dangers. Caligula was learning that power in Rome was not only about strength, but also about manipulation and survival. Things took a devastating turn for Agrippina and her family. Under Sejanus's influence, Tiberius accused Agrippina and her children of treason. Agrippina was exiled, and her children met cruel fates. Nero, Caligula's older brother, died in prison, while Agrippina, after enduring immense abuse, was starved to death. Now imagine young Caligula, torn from everything he knew, watching his family be destroyed piece by piece. He was sent to the island of Capri, where Tiberius lived. There, Caligula had to suppress all his resentment, pretending to be obedient while harboring the pain and hatred of all he had lost. At the same time, he began learning the intricacies of power. He observed Tiberius and his advisors, perfecting his speech and political demeanor. It was as if he were quietly amassing strength for the future. Over the years, Caligula gained Tiberius's trust, even as he secretly despised him. As Tiberius aged, the dynamics began to shift. Caligula was appointed quaestor, a significant political position for someone his age, and was named one of the heirs to the empire alongside Tiberius Gemellus, Tiberius's grandson. When Tiberius died in 37 AD, rumors swirled that Caligula may have hastened his death by smothering him with a pillow. True or not, the fact remains that as soon as Tiberius passed, the Praetorian Guard wasted no time in proclaiming Caligula as the new emperor. Picture a young man who had spent his life surrounded by tragedy and betrayal, now seated on the throne of the most powerful empire in the world. Initially, the people adored him. He was seen as the heir of Germanicus, the beloved general, and promised to be a ruler who would bring peace and prosperity. However, this tranquil phase would not last. In the first months of his reign, Caligula seemed like a dream come true for the Romans. He did everything to please the people. He doubled the pay of the Praetorian Guard soldiers, distributed bonuses to citizens, and honored his family by burying his relatives in the mausoleum of Augustus. But suddenly everything changed. Caligula fell gravely ill, and it appeared to alter his personality. He transformed from a popular and promising young ruler into a paranoid and cruel despot. After his recovery, he began seeing enemies everywhere and systematically eliminated anyone he perceived as a threat. The most shocking event was when he forced his co-heir, Tiberius Gemellus, to take his own life, accusing him of conspiracy. Even Macro, the head of the Praetorian Guard who had supported Caligula's rise to the throne, was executed. It seemed no one was safe from the unpredictable emperor. From that point on, Caligula began to display an extravagant and completely unpredictable side. He made decisions that left everyone perplexed. For example, he spent a fortune decorating his horse, Incitatus, with jewels and even considered appointing it as consul, a position of the utmost political importance in Rome. Additionally, Caligula loved grand projects, even if they served no purpose. One of the most famous was the construction of a 3-kilometer-long floating bridge over the Bay of Baiae, merely so he could parade across it with his soldiers. Imagine the cost and effort for something that seemed more like a tasteless prank than a useful endeavor. What truly irked the senators was how Caligula humiliated them publicly. He ridiculed Senate members, made important decisions without consulting them, and proclaimed himself a god, demanding worship. He even ordered coins to be minted with his own image, something uncommon for emperors at the time. To the people, he was a fascinating figure, but to politicians, Caligula was dismantling the power structure of Rome. Caligula's obsession with power and adoration reached extreme levels. He didn't want to be just an emperor. He wanted to be seen as a living god. To this end, he dressed as mythological figures such as Hercules, Apollo, and even Venus, the goddess of love. He ordered gigantic statues of himself to be built and demanded they be worshipped. One of the most controversial episodes involved the Temple of Jerusalem. Caligula ordered a statue of himself to be placed inside the temple, an enormous insult to the Jews who rejected idols. The population panicked, and the governor of Judea begged Caligula to abandon the plan. In the end, the emperor's sudden death prevented the plan from being carried out. But the episode revealed just how far he was willing to go to be revered. Moreover, his military campaigns became bizarre. During an attempt to invade Britannia, he simply ordered his soldiers to collect seashells on the beach, as if they were spoils of war. To many, this proved he was losing touch with reality. Caligula's actions began to create an unsustainable environment in Rome. The Senate, already weary of his humiliations, and even his own guards, started conspiring against him. The Praetorian Guard, led by Cassius Chaerea, was particularly enraged. Caligula frequently insulted them, mocked their loyalty, and even threatened to dissolve the unit. In January 41 AD, things reached a breaking point. During an event at the palace, Cassius Chaerea and other members of the guard decided to act. They ambushed and assassinated him, stabbing him repeatedly, but the conspirators didn't stop there. Fearing his lineage might reclaim power, they also killed his wife, Caesonia, and his young daughter. Caligula's death marked the end of a chaotic and terrifying reign, but the chaos in Rome didn't subside. Caligula's uncle, Claudius, who had always been treated as insignificant by everyone, was hiding behind a curtain, terrified by the revolt. However, the Praetorian Guard found him and, in an unexpected move, proclaimed Claudius as the new emperor, ushering in a new phase for the Roman Empire. And so the story of Caligula came to an end, leaving behind a legacy of madness, extravagance, and terror. With the death of Caligula, Rome breathed a sigh of relief, but the memory of his reign left deep scars. He had pushed the empire to its limits with his extravagance and tyranny, and his downfall demonstrated how even the most powerful can be toppled when they overstep boundaries. His uncle Claudius was placed on the throne in a time of great uncertainty. Imagine a man who had always been underestimated, seen as weak and even ridiculed, suddenly becoming the most powerful person in the empire. Claudius not only needed to restore trust in the government, but also to address the damage caused by Caligula. Caligula's reign became an example of how unchecked power can destroy both the one who wields it and those around them. His story remains one of the most dramatic in ancient Rome, full of lessons about ambition, madness, and the dangers of ruling through fear. Caligula's actions also offered lessons for the leaders who came after him. The Senate realized that imperial power, when misused, could endanger the entire empire. This led many to explore ways to limit the absolute authority of future emperors, though such reforms proved challenging to implement. For the people, Caligula became almost a legend. Some remembered him as the promising young ruler who began his reign with popularity, while others saw him as a symbol of madness and oppression. His insistence on being treated as a god and his bizarre decisions, like appointing his horse as consul and building useless projects, became tales passed down through generations, solidifying his image as an emperor who had completely lost touch with reality. Even after his death, Caligula's actions echoed through Rome. His obsession with absolute power served as a warning of what could happen when a ruler prioritizes personal desires over the well-being of the nation. Thus, Caligula remained in Rome's memory as an extreme example of how power can corrupt and destroy. As disastrous as Caligula's reign was, it marked the beginning of a reflection on how power should be exercised in Rome. With Claudius's rise, the empire had a chance to reorganize, and the new emperor quickly demonstrated a vastly different style of governance. Claudius was cautious, strategic, and more focused on administration than grandeur. Caligula's story also highlights how a leader's upbringing can shape their actions. Raised amidst tragedies, betrayals, and fear, Caligula was shaped by a distorted view of power, where everything was resolved through force and intimidation. For this reason, Caligula is remembered not only as one of Rome's most insane and cruel emperors, but also as an example of how misguided power can lead a ruler to destroy both themselves and their nation. It is a story that, despite its exaggerations and oddities, makes us reflect on the balance between power, responsibility, and humanity. And though Caligula's reign was one of the shortest in Rome's history, lasting only 4 years, its impact was enduring. He became a symbol of how absolute power can be dangerous when placed in the wrong hands. Stories about his eccentricities, such as ordering soldiers to collect seashells as spoils of war or planning to place a statue of himself in the Temple of Jerusalem, are remembered even today. These bizarre actions illustrate how he blended megalomania with a complete disconnection from reality. His behavior generated fear but also revolt. The conspiracy that led to his death was the result of years of abuses and illogical decisions. The Senate and the Praetorian Guard, initially his allies, eventually saw him as a greater threat than any external enemy. Finally, the story of Caligula teaches an important lesson. Power without control and a greater purpose can lead to the downfall of both its wielder and those around them. His life is one of Rome's most fascinating, but it also serves as an eternal warning about the dangers of arrogance and tyranny. With the end of Caligula's reign, Rome entered a period of political and emotional reconstruction. The chaos he left behind required Claudius, the new emperor, to restore order and rebuild trust with the Senate and the people. Despite being underestimated, Claudius proved to be an efficient leader who managed to steer the empire back on track. The fall of Caligula also had a cultural impact. He became an almost mythological figure, representing the extremes of madness and tyranny. Many of the stories about him, though exaggerated over time, served as a reminder of how absolute power without balance can be disastrous. More than an emperor, Caligula became a historical lesson. He demonstrates that leading a great empire is not merely about strength, but also wisdom, humility, and respect for institutions and the people. The memory of his chaotic reign lives on as a warning to all who seek power without responsibility. Despite the horrors of Caligula's reign, his story is fascinating because it reveals the complexity of power. He began as a young man with a bright future, but family tragedies and the environment of political intrigue transformed him into a leader who ruled through fear and extravagance. Caligula not only broke with Rome's political traditions, but also challenged the very concept of imperial leadership. His reign exposed the vulnerabilities of Rome's political system, showing how the concentration of power in a single individual could lead to abuses. The Praetorian Guard, tasked with protecting the emperor, ultimately became the force that decided who lived and died on the throne. What is most intriguing is that, behind the madness and absurd decisions, there was still a man marked by the pains of his past. Caligula may have become a victim of the very system that created him, a cycle of ambition, betrayal, and fear. His story is not just about Rome, but about what happens when power is wielded without limits or purpose. Today, Caligula is remembered as one of history's most controversial emperors, an eternal symbol of how thin the line between genius and madness can be, especially when one has the world at their feet. After his death, Caligula's figure was deliberately erased from official history by those who wanted to restore order in Rome. His name was removed from monuments and documents, and his deeds, good or bad, were buried under layers of scandal and rumor. It was as if Rome wanted to forget he ever existed. Ironically, it was precisely this attempt to erase him that turned him into a legend. Stories of his eccentricities and cruelties were told and retold, gaining increasingly bizarre details. The result was that Caligula became one of Rome's most infamous emperors, even centuries after his death. He represents, even today, the dark side of power. What happens when a leader prioritizes their own desires above the needs of their people? His story is a reminder that a throne can be both a symbol of glory and a deadly trap. Above all, it teaches that a ruler's legacy is not only defined by what they build, but also by the impact they leave on their nation's collective memory. The rise and fall of Caligula also show how extreme power can dehumanize both the ruler and those around them. While he wielded absolute authority, his allies turned into conspirators, and his court became a silent battlefield. Everyone was trapped in a game of survival where no one trusted anyone. As shocking as it may seem, Caligula's story is not just about his madness. It reflects the flaws of the Roman system, which relied on individuals rather than solid institutions. Without clear limits, imperial power became something that could be shaped by the whims of a single man. If you've made it this far, thank you so much for following along with this fascinating and mysterious story about Caligula. Don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any of our upcoming videos. There are plenty more incredible stories on the way. Let me know in the comments, which part of Caligula's life did you find the most terrifying? I'm curious to hear your thoughts. See you next time.